Stephen fired me to give his nephew a job, but he made a fatal mistake. He demanded I surrender a laptop containing active state secrets to an uncleared civilian. I tried to warn him, but he laughed. So I handed it over, waited 5 minutes, and signed the affidavit that sent him to federal prison for espionage. Before this story continues, tell me, where are you watching from today and what's the temperature? I need to know you're ready, because what Stephen did next wasn't just stupid. It was a felony that destroyed the entire company. In the world of high-level defense contracting, silence is usually a good thing. Silence means the encryption is holding, the data tunnels are secure, and the Department of Defense isn't calling on the red line. At 4:45 p.m. on a Friday, my office was perfectly silent. The only sound was the hum of the server stack in the corner and the rhythmic tapping of my fingers on a mechanical keyboard. I was finalizing the weekly integrity report for the Aegis project, a cryptographic integration system used by field operatives overseas. I wasn't just an IT manager. I was the director of cryptographic integration. My name is Martha Cooper, and at 34, I was the youngest director in the history of Chimera systems. I didn't get here by playing golf with the board members. I got here because I was the only person in the building who understood how to weave a digital basket that not even the NSA could unravel without a key. My phone buzzed. It wasn't a call, it was a priority calendar invite. Subject: immediate restructuring update. Host: Stephen Reed, VP of Strategy. Location: Executive Conference Room B. Time, now. I frowned. Stephen Reed had been with the company for exactly 3 weeks. He was an outside hire, brought in from a consumer electronics firm to shake things up and trim the fat. In his first town hall meeting, he had referred to our military contracts as accounts and our classified data as content. It had made every engineer in the room wince. Restructuring, I whispered to myself, the word tasting like sour milk. I looked at my desk. Sitting next to my keyboard was the red drive. It was a ruggedized, biometrically locked external hard drive that looked like a black brick wrapped in red rubber. It wasn't just storage, it was a physical key. It contained the localized encryption seeds for the entire Aegis network. Without it, the satellite uplink wouldn't handshake. With it, you could theoretically reroute drone feeds in real time. Possessing it required a top-secret SCI clearance. Taking it out of the secure facility required a courier bag and armed escort. Leaving it on a desk while I went to a meeting? That was a gray area, but since my office was a SCIF, Sensitive Compartmented Information Facility, with a badge-locked steel door, it was acceptable protocol. I locked my workstation. The screens went black. I stood up, smoothed the creases in my blazer, and grabbed my notebook. I didn't grab the red drive. I left it sitting right there, next to my coffee mug. As I walked down the hallway, the fluorescent lights hummed overhead. The office was mostly empty. The sales team had already left for happy hour. But the engineering wing was still populated by the diehards, the guys in hoodies and headphones who lived on caffeine and code. I passed by the break room and saw the digital clock. 4:52 p.m. My stomach tightened. Friday afternoon meetings were never about updates. They were about executions. In corporate America, you fire people on Fridays so they can't cause a scene because the building is empty, and they have the weekend to cool off before they can call a lawyer. I reached Executive Conference Room B. The frosted glass walls obscured the figures inside, but I could hear laughter. It wasn't nervous laughter. It was loud, boisterous. We just won the lottery laughter. I swiped my badge. The light turned green. I pushed the heavy door open and stepped into the cool, conditioned air of the boardroom. The laughter stopped instantly. Stephen Reed was sitting at the head of the table. He was a man in his late 40s who wore suits that were too shiny and exerted a cologne radius of about 6 feet. He smiled at me, but it didn't reach his eyes. It was a shark smile, all teeth and no warmth. "Martha," he said, gesturing to the empty chair at the opposite end of the long mahogany table. "So glad you could join us. Close the door, would you? I did as asked. Mr. Reed, the invite said restructuring. Please call me Stephen. We're all family here, he said, leaning back and clasping his hands behind his head. And yes, big changes, exciting changes. I sat down. That's when I noticed the other person in the room. Sitting to Stephen's right was a young man, maybe 22, wearing a hoodie with a cryptocurrency logo on it and ripped jeans. He was spinning a fidget spinner on the polished wood of the conference table. I didn't know it yet, but the man with the fidget spinner was about to become the centerpiece of a federal investigation. Stephen didn't waste time. He was the kind of manager who believed that efficiency meant speaking fast and ignoring details. Martha, let's cut to the chase, Stephen said, dropping his hands to the table with a slap that made the young man jump slightly. I've been reviewing the budget for the IT department. Cryptographic integration, I corrected him gently. We aren't general IT, we don't fix printers. Stephen waved his hand dismissively, as if swatting away a fly. Potatoes, it's all computers, right? It's all ones and zeros. The point is, your department is bleeding money. The salaries alone are astronomical. And frankly, I don't see the ROI. The ROI is that our soldiers don't get their communications intercepted, I said, my voice steady. We service the Department of Defense. The contract requires specific clearance levels and skill sets. You can't outsource that. That's the old way of thinking, Stephen said, shaking his head with a pitying look. That's the chimera systems of yesterday. I was brought in to modernize, to disrupt. He stood up and walked over to the whiteboard, grabbing a red marker. He wrote a single word in massive block letters, synergy. We need to be leaner, he said, tapping the board. We need to integrate new blood, digital natives, people who understand the blockchain, people who get the cloud. I stared at him. Our systems are air-gapped, Stephen. We don't use the cloud. We specifically cannot use the cloud. It's illegal for the data we handle. He sighed, looking at the young man in the hoodie as if they shared a secret joke. See what I mean? Resistance. Friction. This is why we can't move fast. He turned back to me, his face hardening. The fake smile dropped. Martha, your position is being eliminated effective immediately. The words hung in the air. I had expected a budget cut. I had expected a hiring freeze. I hadn't expected to be fired. I had been with Chimera for 8 years. I had built the Aegis architecture from the ground up. Eliminated? I asked, my heart hammering against my ribs. Stephen, you can't eliminate the director role. It's a requirement of the federal contract. Someone has to hold the signatory authority for the encryption keys. Oh, the role isn't disappearing in function, Stephen said, checking his Rolex. Just the title. And the salary. We're going to consolidate it under a new title, Lead Operations Ninja. I blinked. Lead Operations Ninja. Exactly, Stephen beamed. Much more modern, much more agile. And who, I asked, looking at the kid in the hoodie, is going to be this ninja? Stephen placed a hand on the young man's shoulder. Martha, I'd like you to meet George. He's going to be taking over your portfolio. He's a wizard with this stuff. Self-taught. I looked at George. He looked up from his fidget spinner and gave me a lazy wave. Sup, he said. George, I said slowly. Does George have a surname? Cook, Stephen said. George Cook. And what is George's background? I asked, looking back at Stephen. He's been consulting for some major startups, Stephen said vaguely. He ran the social media strategy for CoinHype. He knows the digital landscape better than anyone. Social media, I repeated. Stephen, we handle classified military intelligence. Does George have a top-secret clearance? Stephen rolled his eyes. There you go again with the red tape. Clearance this, clearance that. It's just paperwork, Martha. We'll file it on Monday. George can start working under a provisional status immediately. There is no provisional status for TSSCI, I said, my voice dropping an octave. If he touches the network without adjudication, it's a felony. You're being dramatic, Stephen snapped. And frankly, this attitude is exactly why we're letting you go. You're a blocker. George here is an enabler. I'm an enabler, George piped up, looking pleased. You sure are, kiddo, Stephen said, winking at him. I realized then what was happening. It wasn't about synergy. It wasn't about budget. I looked closely at George, then at Stephen. They had the same nose, the same slightly receded chin. He's your nephew, isn't he? I asked. Stephen froze. The air in the room went from cold to Arctic. George is a qualified professional, Stephen said, his voice dangerous. His relation to me is irrelevant. It's nepotism, I said. And you're firing a qualified director to give a six-figure job to a kid who probably thinks Python is just a snake. Watch your tone, Stephen hissed. You are an at-will employee, and as of 5 minutes ago, you are a former employee. Now, hand over your badge. I reached into my pocket, unclipped my badge, and placed it on the table. Fine. If you want to burn the department down, that's your prerogative. I'll have my things packed in an hour. No, Stephen said, holding up a hand. Security will escort you out. You don't touch anything. We can't risk a disgruntled employee sabotage. I have personal items in my office, I said. We'll box them and mail them to you, Stephen said dismissively. Right now, I need the keys to the office and the passwords. I stood up. The passwords are token-generated. They reset every 60 seconds. I can't just give them to you. George will need his own token. We'll figure that out, Stephen said. But first, there's one more thing, the drive. I froze. What drive? The red one, Stephen said, pointing a finger at me. I've seen it on your desk. The master drive, or whatever you call it, the one that controls the system. My blood ran cold. He was talking about the Aegis Seed drive. Stephen, I said, very carefully. That drive contains state secrets. It is property of the U.S. government. It cannot be handed over to anyone who does not have a confirmed clearance and a rigid need to know. Stephen laughed, a cruel barking sound. I'm the vice president of operations, Martha. I am the need to know. Now go get it. I looked at George again. He was leaning back in the leather chair, scrolling through his phone, completely oblivious to the gravity of the conversation. George, I said, do you know what encryption is? George looked up annoyed. Yeah, obviously, it's like when you scramble the data so hackers can't get it. I used a VPN to watch Netflix in Japan once. I get it. It's a little more complex than Netflix, I said. Okay, boomer, George muttered, returning to his screen. I turned back to Stephen. He called me a boomer. I'm 34. He's disrupting the dynamic, Stephen said, checking his nails. Look, Martha, I don't have all day. I have a dinner reservation at 6. Go to your office, get the red drive, and bring it here. Then you can leave. Stephen, listen to me, I said, trying one last time to break through his arrogance. That drive is not a corporate asset. It is a munition. Legally, it is a weapon. If I give it to you and you give it to him, I pointed at George, we are breaking the Espionage Act. That is federal prison time, for me and for you. Stephen slammed his hand on the table. Enough! I am tired of you using technical jargon to try and protect your little fiefdom. You are trying to hoard information to make yourself indispensable. It's a classic power play, and I see right through it. He stood up and walked around the table until he was inches from my face. I could smell the stale coffee on his breath. You are insubordinate, he spat. Now you have 2 choices. Choice A, you go get the drive, hand it over like a professional, and I sign off on a severance package that includes 3 months' pay and a positive reference. He paused for effect. Choice B, you refuse, and I have security drag you out. I will mark you as terminated for cause in the system. I will fight your unemployment. And I will tell every other contractor in this city that you stole company property and sabotaged our data. You will never work in this industry again. He smiled that shark smile again. So, Martha, what's it going to be, the carrot or the stick? I looked at him. I looked at George, who was now taking a selfie with the conference room art. I thought about the years I had spent building my reputation. I thought about the security protocols I had memorized. I thought about the oath I had sworn when I received my clearance. And then a calm clarity washed over me. Stephen wanted the drive. He wanted to give a loaded gun to a toddler because he thought it was a toy. He was threatening my livelihood, my career, and my reputation. He thought he held all the cards, but he didn't know the rules of the game. "Okay," I said softly. Stephen's shoulders relaxed. "See, was that so hard?" "I'll get the drive," I said, "but I want you to acknowledge something first." "What?" Stephen asked, impatient. "I want you to acknowledge that you are ordering me to hand over the Aegis Red Drive to you and George Cook, despite my verbal warning regarding its classification." Stephen rolled his eyes and let out a dramatic groan. "Yes, Martha. I, Stephen Reed, Vice President, am ordering you to give me the damn drive. Are we done with the legal mumbo-jumbo?" "Yes," I said, "we're done." "Good, go get it. Bring it here. George needs to start the migration before the weekend." "Migration?" I asked. "Yeah," George said, looking up. "I'm gonna upload the data to a private AWS bucket so the remote team can access it. Make it more accessible, you know." My heart stopped for a second. Uploading the Aegis keys to a public cloud server. It wouldn't just be a breach, it would be a global security catastrophe. It would expose every operative in the Middle East. "Right," I said, my voice eerily calm. "Accessibility." I turned and walked out of the conference room. As the door closed behind me, I heard Stephen say, "See, you just have to be firm with these legacy employees. They fold like cheap suits." I walked down the hallway toward my office. My hands weren't shaking. My breathing was steady. I wasn't folding. I was loading the weapon. The walk back to my office felt like a funeral march, but the corpse wasn't mine. It was the company's. I swiped my badge at the steel door of the server integration room. The maglock disengaged with a heavy thunk. I stepped inside, and the silence of the SCIF, Sensitive Compartmented Information Facility, wrapped around me like a blanket. The air was colder here, kept at a constant 68 degrees for the hardware. My hands hovered over my keyboard. I had a choice. I could delete everything. I could wipe the local keys, scramble the seeds, and leave Stephen with a useless brick. It would save the national security data, but it would also land me in court for destruction of corporate property. Stephen would sue me for millions, and with his high-priced lawyers, he might even win. No, that was emotional. That was messy. I needed to be precise. I opened a drawer and pulled out a standard government form, DD Form 1907, signature and record of receipt. It was usually reserved for couriers transporting classified material between bases. It was carbon copy paper, old school, impossible to hack, impossible to delete. I grabbed a black pen and filled out the fields with aggressive precision. Sender, Martha Cooper, Director. Recipient, Stephen Reed, VP of Operations. Item description, Aegis Integration Drive, Top Secret SCI. Chain of Custody Transfer Time, 17:05 EST. Under the comments section, I wrote in clear block letters, "Warning, recipient advised of federal classification. Recipient ASSUMES full legal liability for unlawful dissemination to uncleared persons, C. George Cook." It was an impossible demand for any sane person to sign. Signing this document was essentially admitting, in writing, that you were about to commit a crime. But Stephen wasn't sane. He was arrogant, and arrogance is a blinder. I packed my personal items quickly. My framed diploma from MIT, a photo of my team at the last Christmas party back when morale existed, a small cactus plant. I placed them in a cardboard box. Then I looked at the red drive. It pulsed with a slow, red LED heartbeat. It was currently mounted to the secure terminal. To remove it, I had to initiate the dismount sequence. I typed in my admin credentials. The screen prompted, "Reason for removal." I typed, Executive Order, Direct Transfer to VP Stephen Reed. The system logged it. The timestamp was immutable. I had just created the first link in the chain that would strangle Stephen Reed. I walked back into executive conference room, beholding the box in one left arm and the red drive in my right hand. The mood in the room had shifted. They were impatient now. George was tapping his foot and Stephen was checking his watch. "Took you long enough," Stephen grumbled. "We have a schedule to keep. George needs to get this data onto the cloud before the West Coast team logs on." "The cloud," I repeated, the word tasting like ash. "Right." I placed the drive on the table. It sat there, looking heavy and dangerous against the polished wood. "Here is the drive," I said, "but before you touch it, I need you to sign this." I slid the DD Form 1907 across the table, along with my pen. Stephen picked it up, squinting at the text. "What is this? More red tape." "It's a receipt," I lied smoothly. "Standard protocol. I can't remove an asset from the inventory without a signature. It just says you received it, unless you want me to log it as stolen." "Stolen? Don't be ridiculous," Stephen scoffed. He didn't even read the comments section. He didn't look at the warning I had written in block letters. He just wanted me gone. He scribbled his signature on the line, tearing the top sheet slightly with the force of his pen. "There," he said, sliding the form back. "Happy." "Delirious," I said. I tore off the pink carbon copy and folded it into my pocket. That pink slip of paper was now the most valuable thing I owned. "Give it here," George said, reaching for the drive. I pulled my hand back for a split second. "George, do not plug this into a machine that is connected to the Wi-Fi. Do not plug this into a machine that has Windows Home Edition. This drive has no viral protection because it assumes it is on a secure loop. If you expose it to the open internet, it will beacon." "It will what, bacon?" George snickered. "Beacon," I said. "It will call home, to the Pentagon." Stephen groaned. "Martha, stop trying to scare the kid. He's a digital native. He knows what he's doing. Now get out." I looked at Stephen one last time. "You signed for it, Stephen. It's yours now." I pushed the drive toward George. He grabbed it with greedy hands, like a child grabbing a candy bar. He immediately pulled a sleek, silver MacBook Air out of his backpack. "Does that have a VPN?" I asked, unable to help myself. "Bro, I'm just gonna airdrop the files to my iPad to sort them first," George said, plugging the drive into a USB-C dongle. I felt a physical wave of nausea. Airdrop. He was going to broadcast state secrets over Bluetooth. "Goodbye, Stephen," I said. "Don't let the door hit you," he replied, already looking over George's shoulder. "Look at all those folders. Project Chimera, Black Site 4, boring names. We should rename these." I walked out. I didn't look back. I couldn't. If I stayed 1 second longer, I would have tackled George and ripped the drive out of his hands, and that would have made me the criminal. I had to let the crime happen. Security met me at the elevator. Stephen had evidently called ahead. It was 2 guards I knew well, Mike and Davon. They looked embarrassed. "Sorry, Martha," Mike mumbled, taking my box from me. "Orders from the new VP. We have to escort you to the curb." "It's okay, Mike," I said. "You're just doing your job." They walked me through the lobby, past the reception desk where the company motto, "Security is our promise," was etched in glass. The irony was sharp enough to cut skin. We stepped out into the parking lot. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in bruises of purple and orange. It was 5:18 p.m. "We need your badge," Davon said softly. I handed it over. "Take care of yourselves, guys." "You too, Martha. Place won't be the same." They went back inside, and the heavy glass doors locked behind them. I was standing alone on the sidewalk, a cardboard box at my feet. I pulled out my phone. I had about 3 minutes before it, or rather, the automated script Stephen had probably ordered, wiped my corporate access. I opened the company Slack app. The general channel was quiet, but the engineering private channel, the one Stephen didn't know existed, was blowing up. Dev Dave, why did Martha's status just go to deactivated? Sarasek, guys, the directory just updated. Stephen Reed is listed as acting lead of crypto. Dev Dave, what? Reed can't code hello world in HTML. Who is approving the keys? Sarasek, alert just popped on the dashboard. Someone mounted the red drive on an unrecognized device. Mac OS. Hostname, George's MacBook Pro. Dev Dave, is that a joke? That's a violation. That's a level 1 spill. Sarasek, at Martha, are you there? Please tell me this is a drill. I watched the messages scroll by. They were panicking. Good. They would document everything. Every error log, every unauthorized access attempt, every packet of data George was currently hemorrhaging onto the open web. It was all being recorded by the very team Stephen had insulted. I didn't type a response. I couldn't implicate them. Suddenly, the screen went black. A spinning wheel appeared. Device wipe in progress. Stephen was thorough with the petty stuff, at least. He had nuked my phone. I slipped the useless brick into my pocket and picked up my box. The silence was absolute now. I had no job, I had no access, I had no title. But I had the pink slip in my pocket, and I knew exactly who to call. I walked to my car, unlocked the door, and retrieved my personal burner phone from the glove compartment, a habit from my days in intelligence. I dialed a number I hadn't used in 4 years. It rang twice. "This is Kincaid," a gruff voice answered. "Make it quick." "Sela's," I said, my voice steady. "It's Martha Cooper. I need to cash in that favor." There was a pause. Then the tone of his voice changed completely. "Martha, you haven't called since the Berlin incident. What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong," I said, looking back at the sleek glass building of Chimera Systems. "But I have a feeling you're going to be very interested in a 700 gigabyte data spill that just started broadcasting from my former office." "Spill?" Silas asked sharply. "What kind of data?" "Aegis," I said. The silence on the other end was heavy. "Stay right where you are," Silas said. "I'm on my way." I didn't stay in the parking lot. That would be amateur. Stephen could look out the window and see me, or worse, send Mike and Davon back out to harass me. I drove 2 blocks down to a 24-hour diner called The Hangar. It was the kind of place where the coffee was strong enough to strip paint, and the clientele consisted mostly of truckers and insomniacs. It was also the unofficial meeting spot for the local federal field office because the pancakes were cheap. I sat in a booth near the back, facing the door. I ordered a black coffee and waited. 20 minutes later, a gray sedan pulled into the lot. It was unmarked, domestic, and utterly forgettable, classic bureau issue. Silas Kincaid walked in. He looked older than I remembered. His hair was grayer at the temples, and the lines around his eyes were deeper, but he still carried himself with that restless, predatory energy of a man who hunted spies for a living. He wore a rumpled suit and a raincoat, looking like he'd stepped out of a noir film. He slid into the booth opposite me without a greeting. "Aegis?" he asked, his voice low. "You said Aegis." "Yes," I said, "the full integration suite. Source code, satellite handshakes, operator identities." Silas stared at me. He knew exactly what that meant. If Aegis was compromised, every secure channel in the Middle East theater would have to be burned and rebuilt. It would cost billions. Lives were at risk. "How?" he asked. "The new VP," I said. "Stephen Reed. He fired me about an hour ago, then he demanded I hand over the red drive to his nephew." Silas blinked. "His nephew?" "George Cook," I said. "A 20-something social media strategist with 0 clearance. He plugged the drive into a MacBook. He said he was going to airdrop the files." Silas closed his eyes and rubbed the bridge of his nose. "Jesus, airdrop, is it still active?" "I assume so," I said. "I left the building as soon as the transfer was complete." "Did you try to stop him?" Silas asked, opening his eyes. They were hard now, professional. He was evaluating me as a potential accomplice. "I warned him verbally," I said. 3 times, I warned him about the classification. I warned him about the felony. He threatened to ruin my career if I didn't comply. Verbal warnings are hearsay, Silas said, shaking his head. If this goes to court, his lawyers will say you handed it over voluntarily. They'll say you set him up. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the pink slip of paper. I slid it across the Formica table. Silas picked up the DD Form 1907. He read the comments section. He read Stephen's jagged signature. He looked up at me, a slow grin spreading across his face. You got him to sign a receipt, Silas said, almost admiringly. With a warning attached, I added. He acknowledged custody, he acknowledged the risk, and he did it anyway. Silas tapped the paper. This isn't just a receipt, Martha. This is a confession. You just handed me a slam-dunk espionage conviction on a silver platter. I know, I said. So what happens now? Silas pulled out his phone. Now we go fishing. He dialed a number. Dispatch, this is Agent Kincaid. I need a tactical team at Chimera Systems. Priority 1, Suspected Espionage Act violation in progress. Yeah, bring the van. We're going to need to sniff the Wi-Fi. He hung up and looked at me. You ready to go back to work? I was just fired, I reminded him. You were fired by a corporate VP, Silas said, standing up. You're being deputized as a consultant by the FBI. Let's go. We didn't go back to the office immediately. Silas needed to build the case. We sat in his car in the parking lot of the diner, turning it into a mobile command center. Silas opened a laptop and logged into the Bureau's secure network. I'm checking the network traffic for Chimera's block. If this kid really put the drive online, it should be lighting up the sensors like a Christmas tree. He typed furiously for a moment, then stopped. He let out a low whistle. Look at this, he said, turning the screen toward me. It was a graph of outbound data traffic from Chimera's IP address. It had spiked vertically at 5:20 p.m., right when George would have plugged in the drive. He's uploading it, Silas said, disbelief in his voice. He's actually uploading the raw data. Where is it going? I asked, leaning in. Looks like Amazon S3, Silas said, a public bucket, and wait, what is this? He pointed to a secondary stream of data. Peer-to-peer, I said, recognizing the protocol. He must have a torrent client running in the background, or maybe malware on his personal laptop. If he has malware, Silas said grimly, then the Chinese and the Russians probably already have the files. They scan for keywords like Aegis constantly. We have to cut the connection, I said. Not yet, Silas said. If we cut it now, he might claim it was an accident. We need to prove intent. We need to prove he accessed the files. How? We need the logs, Silas said. Can you get into the system remotely? My access was revoked, I said. Stephen wiped my account. What about a backdoor? Silas asked. Come on, Martha. You built the system. You always leave a way in. I hesitated. There is a break glass account. It's for emergency auditing. But using it without a warrant is illegal. Silas reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. He handed it to me. I anticipated something like this, he said. It's a Title III emergency authorization. Signed by a federal judge about 10 minutes ago. We can legally monitor the communications. I took the paper. My hands were shaking slightly. This was it. We were crossing the Rubicon. Okay, I said. I took Silas's laptop. I navigated to the hidden admin portal I had coded years ago, a login page thaw. T looked like a 404 error screen, unless you knew the specific key combination. I typed it in, Control-Shift-F12. The login prompt appeared. User, Auditor01 password. I hit enter. The screen flashed green. We're in, I said. I navigated to the active session logs. There was only one active user on the internal network, admin guest. That's George, I said. I opened his activity log. It was a disaster. 1722, drive mounted. 1724, file Aegis master keydat copied to desktop. 1726, application, Dropbox, launched. 1728, upload, started, 750 GB. Dropbox, Silas groaned. He's putting the nuclear codes on Dropbox. It gets worse, I said, pointing to the screen. Look at the file permissions. George hadn't just uploaded the files. He had set the link sharing to anyone with the link can view. He made it public, I whispered. He didn't just share it with his team, he made it public. Silas slammed the laptop shut. That's it, that's the ball game, let's move. Back inside the conference room at Chimera Systems, things were likely feeling very different. I could only imagine the scene, but based on the logs I had seen, I knew exactly what was happening. Stephen was probably pacing, feeling triumphant. He had cut the fat. He had modernized. He was probably already drafting an email to the board about his efficiency. George was probably bored, watching a progress bar crawl across his screen, unaware that the bar represented the end of his life as he knew it. Silas and I pulled up to the main gate of the Chimera campus. This time, we weren't alone. Behind us was a black tactical van and 2 marked police cruisers. The guard at the gate, a man I didn't recognize, probably a night shift guy, stepped out, looking confused. "Can I help you folks?" he asked. Silas rolled down the window and held up his badge. "FBI, open the gate, now." The guard's eyes widened. He scrambled for the button, the barrier arm lifted. We drove through. "Where are they?" Silas asked as we parked in the executive spots. "Conference room B," I said. "Second floor, glass walls, you can't miss it." "You stay close to me," Silas said. "I want you to identify the hardware." We got out of the car. The tactical teams spilled out of the van, 6 agents in windbreakers with FBI in yellow letters on the back. They weren't drawing weapons, but they were moving with a purpose that was terrifying to behold. We walked into the lobby. The night receptionist looked up, gasped, and reached for the phone. "Don't," Silas barked, his voice echoing in the marble hall. "Put the phone down and step away from the desk." She dropped the receiver and raised her hands. We swept past her to the elevators. I swiped my temporary visitor pass, which shouldn't have worked, but Silas had used an override key. The doors opened. We rode up in silence. The elevator music was a cheerful jazz tune. It felt surreal. The doors opened on the second floor. We walked down the hallway. I could hear Stephen's voice booming from the conference room. "And that's why we need to pivot to a subscription model for the encryption keys. Think of the recurring revenue." I almost laughed. He was pitching a subscription model for military secrets. Silas held up a hand. The team stopped. He looked at me. "Ready." "Ready," I said. Silas kicked the door open. It slammed against the glass wall with a crash that shook the room. "FBI, nobody move." Stephen jumped so hard he knocked his chair over. George dropped his fidget spinner. "What is the meaning of this?" Stephen shouted, his face turning red. "Do you know who I am?" "Stephen Reed," Silas asked, walking into the room. "Yes, and I demand to know." "Stephen Reed, you are under arrest for violation of the Espionage Act, 18 U.S. Code 793, Silas said, his voice cutting through Stephen's bluster like a knife. "Step away from the table." Stephen sputtered. "Espionage? Are you insane? I'm a vice president." Silas ignored him. He pointed at George. "You, hands where I can see them, step away from the computer." George looked terrified. I was just backing up the files, man. Stephen told me to." "Silence," Silas commanded. He turned to me. "Ms. Cooper, is that the drive?" I stepped into the room. Stephen saw me, and his eyes bulged. "You," he screamed. "You called them, you vindictive little." "Ms. Cooper," Silas repeated, "is that the drive?" I looked at the table. The red drive was there, pulsing its red light. It was plugged into the silver MacBook. "Yes, Agent Kincaid," I said clearly. "That is the Aegis integration drive, and it is currently connected to an unauthorized, uncleared device." Silas nodded. He signaled to the agents. "Bag it, Everything, the drive, the laptop, the phones, all of it. "You can't do this," Stephen yelled as an agent grabbed his arm. "I have a receipt. She gave it to me." "I know," Silas said, pulling the pink slip from his pocket. "She gave me the copy. The one where she warned you in writing that this was a felony. You signed it, Stephen." Stephen stopped fighting. He looked at the pink paper. He looked at me. And for the first time, I saw the arrogance drain out of him, replaced by the crushing weight of reality. "Martha," he whispered, "what have you done?" "I just followed orders," I said coldly. "Yours." The silence in the room following the raid was broken only by the hysterical, hyperventilating sobs of George Cook. He was handcuffed, sitting in the ergonomic chair he had been spinning in just an hour ago. His face was a mask of sheer, childish terror. Stephen Reed was standing against the wall, an agent on either side of him. He wasn't crying. He was staring at the pink slip of paper on the table, the receipt he had signed, as if trying to telepathically set it on fire. "Agent Kincaid," I said, breaking the spell. "The laptop is still active. If it goes to sleep, the disk encryption might kick in. We need to preserve the RAM state." Silas nodded, snapping on a pair of blue nitrile gloves. He approached the silver MacBook like it was a bomb. "George," Silas said, his voice terrifyingly calm, "I need you to tell me exactly what you did in the last 30 minutes. And do not lie to me, because the logs will contradict you, and every lie adds 5 years to your sentence." George choked out a sob. I just wanted to make it accessible. Stephen said we needed to democratize the data." "Step by step," Silas commanded, hovering over the trackpad. I plugged in the red drive," George stammered. "It didn't show up at first, so I Googled how to mount Linux Drive on Mac." I closed my eyes. He Googled it on an open network. "Then what?" Silas asked. "I downloaded a driver," George sniffled. "From a forum, it worked. The files showed up, but there were so many, so I thought, the cloud is safer, right? Like redundancy." "So you logged into Dropbox," Silas said, looking at the screen. "Yeah, my personal pro account," George said, as if this was a mitigating factor. "I have 2 terabytes of space." Silas leaned in, squinting at the screen. He navigated to the browser history. Then he clicked on a tab that was running in the background. "Martha," Silas said, "come look at this." I walked over. The screen showed the Dropbox upload queue. It was finished. 752 GB uploaded. But that wasn't what Silas was pointing at. He was pointing at a small, unassuming terminal window open in the corner of the screen. "What is that?" Stephen asked from the wall, his voice trembling. "Is that code?" I leaned closer, reading the text scrolling rapidly in the terminal. "Process ID, 8821 reverse shell, connection established. 192.168.110.89, XXX, XXX. Roman 20, St. Petersburg, status, exfiltrating." My stomach dropped. "That driver he downloaded," I whispered. "It wasn't a driver, it was a Trojan." "He didn't just upload the files to Dropbox," Silas said, straightening up. "He installed malware that opened a direct tunnel to a server in Russia. George didn't just leave the back door open. He invited the burglars in and made them tea." George looked between us, confusion clouding his fear. "Russia? No, I just downloaded it from FreeDriversNet." "You compromised the entire Aegis network," I said, looking at the kid. "Real time, they aren't just reading the files, George. They are inside the machine." The atmosphere in the room shifted from corporate crime scene to national security crisis in a nanosecond. "Cut the connection," Silas barked to one of the tech agents. "Hard line. Sever the fiber at the junction box in the basement." "On it," the agent yelled, sprinting out of the room. Silas pulled out his secure phone. It was already ringing. He looked at the screen and grimaced. "Who is it?" I asked, though I already knew. "The Pentagon," Silas said. "Cyber Command just saw the beacon." He answered the phone, putting it on speaker so I could hear. "Kincaid." "Agent Kincaid," a voice boomed, deep, distorted by encryption and utterly devoid of humor. We have a frantic heartbeat from a localized asset at Chimera Systems. Signature matches the Aegis Master key. Is the asset secure? Negative, Command, Silas said, looking at Stephen. The asset has been exposed to the public internet via a compromised host. We have confirmed exfiltration to a foreign IP. There was a silence on the line so profound, it felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. Status of the keyholder, the voice asked. The keyholder, Ms. Cooper, warned the hostile actors, but was relieved of command prior to the incident, Silas reported. She is currently assisting in containment. Understood, the voice said. Initiate Protocol 0. We are burning the network, rekeying all satellites. Tell Ms. Cooper she is authorized to execute the local kill switch. Copy that, Silas said. The line went dead. Silas looked at me. You heard him, P. Protocol 0. Stephen stepped forward, trying to regain some semblance of authority. Wait a minute. What does burning the network mean? Does that mean our contract is canceled? I turned to Stephen. The anger I felt was cold and hard like steel. It means, I said, that the Department of Defense is currently remotely destroying every piece of software we have installed on their equipment to prevent the enemy from using it. They are bricking billions of dollars of hardware. And the bill? Stephen asked, his face pale. The government doesn't pay for negligence, Stephen, I said. They charge for damages. Chimera Systems is going to be liable for the replacement cost of the entire satellite encryption grid. How much? Stephen whispered. Roughly $400 million, I estimated. And that's just the hardware. The legal fines will be separate. Stephen's knees gave out. He actually slid down the wall, sitting on the floor in his expensive Italian suit. I have a receipt, he mumbled, looking at the pink slip on the table. I have a receipt. That receipt, Silas said, looming over him, is the only reason you aren't being treated as a foreign combatant right now. It proves you're stupid, not a traitor. But you're still going to prison. Martha, Silas said, the kill switch, do it. I need a terminal, I said, and my access is still revoked. Use George's, Silas said, gesturing to the infected MacBook. It's already connected. I sat down in George's chair. The heat from his body was still on the leather. It was disgusting. I moved the cursor, ignoring the Dropbox upload complete notification. I opened a terminal window. I didn't need a password for the kill switch. I needed a sequence. It was a hard-coded command I had buried deep in the kernel for exactly this worst-case scenario. I typed, "SUDONUC local assets confirm." I hit enter. For 3 seconds, nothing happened. Then, a deep, mechanical thud resonated through the floorboards. It felt like a heavy object hitting the earth. What was that? George squeaked. That was the main breaker for the server room, I said. The maglocks just engaged on the server racks. The halon gas system is armed. Suddenly, the lights in the conference room flickered and died. The hum of the air conditioning cut out. The ambient noise of the building, the servers, the fans, the elevators, vanished. We were plunged into darkness, illuminated only by the tactical flashlights of the FBI agents and the eerie blue glow of the MacBook screen. Emergency lighting only, Silas announced. Red emergency strobes began to pulse in the hallway, casting long, rhythmic shadows across Stephen's terrified face. Flash, darkness, flash, darkness. The building is in lockdown, I explained, my voice echoing in the sudden quiet. The external doors are sealed, the elevators are grounded, no data leaves, no people leave. Am I trapped here? George asked, his voice rising in panic. Until the FBI processes the scene, I said. This is now a federal containment zone. Stephen struggled to his feet, illuminated by the red strobe. He looked like a ghost. This can't be happening, he muttered. I was just supposed to streamline the department. I was just supposed to save money. You saved plenty, I said, closing the MacBook. You just saved the company from having to pay payroll next month. Because after this, there won't be a company. Silas moved toward the door. All right, let's move them out. We have to walk down the stairs. Cooper, you're with me. As the agents hauled Stephen and George out of the room, I took one last look at the conference table. The red drive was sitting there, dark and lifeless now. The pink receipt was still next to it. I picked up the receipt. I folded it carefully and put it back in my pocket. The building was dark, but for the first time in weeks, I saw everything clearly. The descent down the emergency stairwell was surreal. The red emergency lights cast everything in a blood-colored hue. Ahead of me, George was sobbing loudly, his handcuffs clinking against the metal railing every time he stumbled. Stephen was silent, moving like a man walking to the gallows. Silas walked beside me, his flashlight cutting through the gloom. "You okay?" he asked quietly. "I don't know," I admitted. "I just destroyed the thing I spent 8 years building." "You didn't destroy it," Silas corrected. "You euthanized it before it could turn into a monster. There's a difference." We reached the ground floor. The lobby was chaos. The night receptionist was being interviewed by an agent near the front desk. Uniformed police officers were securing the perimeter. But the most striking sight was the front doors. Through the glass, I could see the flashing lights of at least a dozen vehicles. Not just police. There were black SUVs with government plates. A news van had already arrived, its dish extending like a curious antenna. "News travels fast," I murmured. "When Cyber Command initiates a Protocol 0, people notice," Silas said. "The stock market bots probably picked up the chatter before we even cut the power. Chimera's stock is going to open at 0 tomorrow." We pushed through the doors. The cool night air hit me, a stark contrast to the stifling atmosphere of the dead building. As Stephen was led out, a camera crew rushed forward. Mr. Reed, is it true that Chimera Systems has been blacklisted by the DoD? Do you have a comment on the espionage allegations?" Stephen looked at the camera, his face pale and sweaty. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. An agent pushed his head down and guided him into the back of a waiting SUV. George was next. He was wailing now. "I didn't mean to, I just wanted to optimize the workflow. Check my GitHub, I have 5 stars." The door slammed shut on his protests. Silas turned to me. "We need a statement from you, formal deposition. It's going to be a long night." "I know," I said. "I'm ready." "Also," Silas said, reaching into his pocket, "the director wants to speak with you, personally." I froze. The director of the FBI. "No," Silas said, handing me a phone. "The director of the NSA." I took the phone. "Ms. Cooper," a voice said, clearer this time, not the distorted voice from before. "This is Admiral Vance. I've been briefed on your actions tonight. You executed the break glass protocol with remarkable efficiency." "Thank you, Admiral. I just followed the training." "Training is one thing. Having the guts to pull the trigger on your own employer is another," the Admiral said. "Chimera Systems is finished. We are pulling every contract effective immediately. However, we have a problem. We have a massive integration gap now that Aegis is offline." "I'm aware, sir. It will take months to rebuild." "We don't have months," the Admiral said. "We have days. We need someone who knows the architecture. Someone who knows where the bodies are buried. We're setting up a transition task force. I want you to lead it." I looked at the flashing lights, reflecting off the glass of the building I had just been fired from. "Lead it as what, sir? I'm unemployed." "Not anymore," the Admiral said. "You'd be an independent contractor. Direct report to my office. Name your rate." I looked at Silas. He was smiling. "I'll have to think about the rate, Admiral," I said, "but I'm in." 3 days later, I was sitting in a sterile room at the federal building. On the other side of the two-way mirror, Stephen Reed was sitting at a metal table. He looked terrible. His suit was rumpled, his tie was gone, and he hadn't shaved. He was currently trying to explain the concept of disruption to a federal prosecutor who looked like he ate sharks for breakfast. I was just trying to modernize. Stephen pleaded, slamming his hand on the table. The department was stagnant. I was bringing in new blood. Mr. Reed, the prosecutor said, adjusting his glasses. You instructed an uncleared civilian to upload top-secret munitions data to a public cloud server. You signed a document acknowledging that this was a crime. I didn't read it, Stephen yelled. Who reads the fine print? That wasn't fine print, the prosecutor said dryly. It was handwritten in block letters. Warning, recipient advised of federal classification. Ms. Cooper was very specific. I watched from the observation room. Silas stood next to me, arms crossed. He's still trying to blame you, Silas said. He's claiming you set him up, that you tricked him into signing the receipt. Let him try, I said. The digital forensics don't lie. The timestamps match the signature. He authorized the transfer before I even handed him the drive. George flipped on him, by the way, Silas mentioned. Took a plea deal this morning. 5 years probation and a lifetime ban from touching any computer connected to the internet. He's going to be living like it's 1993 for a long time. And Stephen. Espionage carries a heavy sentence, Silas said. Even with negligence as a defense, he's looking at 10 to 15 years. Gross negligence of national security isn't something judges take lightly. I watched Stephen put his head in his hands. The arrogance was gone. The buzzwords were gone. There was no synergy in prison. What about Chimera? I asked. Filed for Chapter 11 yesterday, Silas said. Stock is trading at 4 cents. The board is being investigated for lack of oversight. The whole house of cards collapsed. Good, I said softly. You seem calm, Silas noted. I am, I said. I did my job, I protected the data, the rest is just cleanup. Speaking of cleanup, Silas said, handing me a thick envelope. This came for you, from the Department of Justice. I opened it, it was a check. Pay to the order of Martha Cooper. Amount, $2,400,000 memo, Whistleblower Reward / False Claims Act. Settlement. I stared at the number. The government fined Chimera $50 million, Silas explained. Under the False Claims Act, the whistleblower gets a percentage. You saved the duty billions in potential damages. This is your cut. I looked at the check, then back at Stephen through the glass. He was weeping now. Justice pays, Silas said with a wink. I sat on the porch of my new house. It was a quiet place, far away from the city, overlooking a lake. The air was clean, and the only sound was the gentle lapping of water against the dock. My laptop sat on the table next to a glass of iced tea. I wasn't working for a boss anymore. I was the Cooper Group, a boutique security consultancy that charged exorbitant fees to tell companies exactly where their stupidity was leaking out. I opened my email, a notification from the Bureau of Prisons. Inmate status update, Stephen Reed, location FCI Danbury. Sentence, 12 years. I closed the tab. I didn't feel joy. I didn't feel malice. I just felt closure. I took a sip of tea and looked out at the water. Stephen had wanted to disrupt. He had wanted to move fast and break things. Well, he succeeded. He broke his career, he broke the company, and he broke his own life. He forgot the one rule that matters in my world. You can't hack the truth. You know, people often ask me if I regret handing over that drive. They ask if I should have fought harder, maybe tackled George, maybe screamed louder. But here's the thing. You cannot save people who are determined to destroy themselves. Stephen Reed didn't fail because he was bad at business. He failed because he was arrogant. He thought rules were for little people. He thought his title gave him immunity from reality. He ignored the experts, he ignored the warnings, and he ignored the law. So, here is the lesson I paid a career to learn. First, if you are an expert in your field, document everything. When a boss asks you to do something stupid, illegal, or dangerous, get it in writing. That pink slip, that DD Form 1907, wasn't just a receipt. It was my shield. Without it, I would be in that cell next to Stephen. Second, never interrupt your enemy when they are making a mistake. I tried to warn Stephen. I gave him every chance to back down. But when he insisted on pulling the trigger, I stepped out of the way of the bullet. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't a trap you set. It's the trap they walk into willingly. Third, know your worth. Stephen fired me because he thought I was expensive. He replaced me with a cheaper option. In the end, that cheap option cost the company $400 million and its existence. Competence is expensive. Incompetence is infinite. Don't be a Stephen. Respect the process. Respect the people who know how the machine works, and never, ever sign a document you haven't read. If this story of justice touched you, please like, share, and subscribe. And remember, the receipts are forever.